Hi, this is going to be a bit of an accumulation of all the books I read in June and July because I forgot to edit June's wrap up, and then it was too late for me to put it up. So I'm just going to do a big, all the books I've read over the past 2 months. So I'll now cut to June and then we'll cut back to me in the same t-shirt for July. Well, today I'm going to be talking you through the books I read in June and my ratings and what I thought of them. So I've got my stats here. I read 8 books which totaled to 3,071 pages, 6 paperbacks and 2 hardbacks, and then I'm trying to get my own TBR down this year. I just did a massive unhaul, so that definitely helped, but I like to keep track of like the own TBR that I'm reading. So I read 3 books from my own TBR, 1 book for work, 2 proof copies and 2 library books. I also hauled 19 books, which is a lot, but I unhauled 53, which is also a lot, which is great. I then also, there's my little TBR here. I read 1 book for my TBR last month, which was not great, but I read 8 books altogether still, so that was good. So the first book I read in June was Femme Fatale. No, it's not. So the first book I read in June was Femme Feral by Sam Bexinger. One of the two. Don't know why I struggled so much on that. And this was actually a library book, so it's gone back now, but I'll put a picture of the cover here. So this one follows a woman who is, I think she's either on the cusp of being 50 or she is in her early 50s. And she goes to the doctors because she's feeling a lot of stress from work. She works quite high up in a big like tech company that works with an app. It's kind of like, oh, what's that app called? Where you can, like the sleep. It's basically like an anti-anxiety app where you can do like meditations. I can't remember what the app is, like the real one that is similar to it. So you can do like meditations and things based on what your worries are at the specific time. So she works quite high up in this company. She's been there since the start of it. She's really close with her boss who started the company up. So she's got a lot of stress going on. She's got a promotion on the horizon that she's really looking forward to. Her husband's not the most supportive. She has an adult daughter who's had problems. She also helps care for her father-in-law, so she's got a lot going on in her life. So she goes to the doctor because she's feeling really stressed and she's got a ton of other symptoms. He just puts it all down to the menopause. So then she starts tracking all of her menopausal symptoms. But at the beginning of the story we see her get she gets knocked over by a bike. She walks onto a cycle path and he runs into her and they both tumble. She gets a cut on her forehead and a woman comes along and like wipes the cut for her, and like with her finger, like spits on her finger and wipes the cut away, and then that's when she starts feeling the weird symptoms. And it turns out she's turning into a werewolf. So it's quite humorous because it's got that like, oh, it's just menopause, but you know, it's actually like werewolf, like lycanthropy symptoms. But we also follow it, so we're following her and her like, oh my gosh, I'm going mad, I'm going crazy. This is all the menopause. Like I black out for hours at a time and I'm just wandering around London. And then we also follow a woman who, her elderly cat has just been killed, and she's like, no, I'm not settling for this. What's killed my cat? Because she doesn't think it's a dog or like a big, they like saying it's a big dog, but she's like, there's definitely something more sinister going on. So she's then trying to uncover what's going on with the dog. So I'm making it sound really, really great. Like the plot sounded amazing and I had really high hopes for it. I'd heard that it was quite funny with the like humour that's happening and things. I ended up rating it a 2.75 stars. And I know controversial did like 0.25s and 0.75s, but it wasn't a 2.5, but it wasn't a 3, definitely. So 2.75 is what I went for. I was really disappointed. I found that I just stopped caring about the plot, and like I was finding it funny. She was entertaining, and like there was like a lot of like female rage of the system of like, oh yeah, she's like looked upon for the promotion she was expecting, for like a really inexperienced man who comes in and just takes the job from her, and like the men in her life don't appreciate, like her husband doesn't appreciate her and things like that, and so she has a lot of rage, and I was almost rooting for her and this rage because I was like, yeah, okay, I can see why you're just taking all your anger out and becoming a werewolf. And then the ending just really disappointed me, and we kind of took like a whole 180 on the situation, and the ending was just a bit rubbish, and I was like, oh, I'm really disappointed with that because it sounded amazing and then it just wasn't. So yeah, 2.75 for that one. I'm glad it was a library book and not one I purchased, because I would have really been disappointed if I'd ended up buying it and then not liking it. So that's why libraries are great things to use. Next up then was actually one of the books on my TBR, and I read Assassin's Apprentice by Rowan Hobb. I read this with one of my friends, and we'd both been saying for ages that we wanted to start this series, and I did actually borrow the book from the library at first, and then as I was getting through it I was like, no, I'm actually really enjoying this, and it's like a 16 book series or something, so I thought I may as well start collecting them, and I ended up buying myself a copy. I also really enjoy how the covers look, like the whole like detailing along here, how it looks like an old book, but it's obviously new paperback. Anyway, so this is a big fantasy world. It's kind of like medieval fantasy, I think you'd say. And they're in the kingdom of the Six Duchies, and we follow a young boy called Fitz, who is left at the doorstep of the king in waiting when he's about 6 or 7, because it turns out he is the king's son. He had out of wedlock with a woman, and the grandfather says, I can't deal with him anymore, we've had him for 6 years, send him back to his father. So he then ends up in the care of Burrich, who is the king in waiting's, what's he called? Like, he looks after his hounds, like his stable master, I guess. He looks after all of his animals. He ends up with him, and ends up going to live in the kingdom. He ends up going to live in the castle, like with the royal family, I guess. But when his father finds out about him, his father abdicates from the throne, so he never actually meets him. He ends up just living with people he works with and his family and things. We start with Fitz being young and just living in the stables and like kind of finding his place in the world, and then when he's slightly older and he becomes old enough to be useful, the king decides that he's going to use Fitz to be kind of like a political liaison. So he's going to train him up to be an assassin, and then he can wear the kingdom's badge, but do things that the royal family won't be able to get away with because he's not quite royal family. So they're basically just using him as a pawn in their game. So Fitz also has like a kind of magic, so then there's like slight things of magic in this world, and we follow him. I think he ends up being about 14 or 15 by the time the book finishes, so we follow him all the way from when he's 6 to then, and it's like Fitz looking back on this, like he's writing this story as an adult looking back on his childhood. And there's a lot of world building and like plot building and things like that at the beginning, so it did take me a good while. Like I found that I had to proper think about what I was reading and like all the different people and the different, because he's young, like we're seeing it through his young eyes. He kind of went off on a few tangents about things that didn't really matter for portions of it, but then when we got properly into the story and into where he was and when he was learning to be an apprentice and learning how to be an apprentice, when he was learning how to be an assassin and learning how to do those jobs, it started to get really interesting. And then yeah, it really hooked me. The last like 150 pages I read in like a day. I really enjoyed the like setup that we saw for the wider world that we're going to experience in the next however many books. I think Robin Hobb did a really good job of that, of like feeding us little bits but not overwhelming us then towards the end. Once you're like settled into the actual story and you can grasp things, I think it becomes a lot easier to follow. I do also, like I said, think so not all of the stories follow Fitz. We have this first trilogy does, and then I think we move on to other characters and then we come back to him later in life. So I think it was a really interesting way of writing the story. I'm really intrigued to see what happens next. I think though it feels more like a wintry series, so I probably won't pick any more of them up, and I have to buy them or get them from the library. I don't own any others, so that kind of puts me off right now because I'm trying to get my TBR down. But I did rate this. I did end up rating this 4 stars, like a very solid 4 stars, and I definitely will continue on at some point with the rest of the series. Next up then, I read another book from my physical TBR, and that was For Real This Time by Beth Regals. I actually met Beth. I went to a signing a while ago and she personalised the book, signed and personalised it for me, which is fun. So in this one we follow Anissa and the story of how she ends up working on her favourite TV show for a summer through an internship. She works at the production studio where it's made. So it's called, what's it called? Of Wrath and Ruin. So it's like a kind of Game of Thrones spoof. she's a massive part of this fandom. She plays like a D&D style game to do with it. She's like the dungeon master. She comes up with all the plots. She writes fan fiction. She has her own character that kind of is in the world, like her D&D character. She self-inserts into the world and things, so she's big into the fandom of this. And she's a little bit of an outcast. I think this technically is the sequel, so there's a different book which follows two of her best friends, and that she's in that as a side character, so I feel like if I'd read that first I would have got more of her story. But in this one she was a bit of an outcast. She didn't really have any friends until she went to sixth form with these characters from the previous book, and then they've got this kind of little group going on, but she's still kind of trying to find her way in the world. Doesn't really know what she wants to do after sixth form ends, kind of thing. And then she goes with her friend to this internship, and she meets her favourite character from the, sorry, it's set on a book series, I didn't say that. Her favourite character from the books is now going to be in the new season of the TV show, and she meets the actor that plays him, and they kind of get off to a rocky start because there's so much riding on him and his character, and whether he'll be any good at playing it. And she's very passionate about it, so they kind of rub each other up the wrong way, and it's a little romance between them two. It's really sweet. I did really enjoy it. I think Beth Reekles has a really lovely writing style. It is a YA book, but like I knew that, so it felt YA, but not in a bad way. Like it just felt very age appropriate for teenagers who are like in sixth form. But it was a really lovely story, and I think having that like fandom side of things to it too was just very nice to read. And being a fan of a show like Game of Thrones, like I could kind of get where she's coming from, and that whole like set in, so it was also set kind of locally to me, it was set in South Wales, that was lovely too. So, and some things just felt very nostalgic, like the way that they speak and the tone that they have is very local to me, so it was very nice. But yeah, I rated this one 4.25, again with the 2.25, but it was higher than a 4, but it wasn't quite a 4.5, but I did really enjoy it, and I definitely will consider reading more of Beth Reekles' books now. I don't know if I'll go back and read, oh, Do You Ship It, it was called. I don't know if I'll go back and read that, because now I've read this, I kind of know what's going to have happened in that first one. But I will read other things that she's written, definitely. Next up then, I read a proof copy of If Books Could Kill by Kate Eberly. This one came out in June. I think it was the middle of June it came out in. But I was lucky to receive a copy of it early to read. So in this one we follow our main character, who lives quite a carefree life. She does like temp jobs, which she can just do for a couple of months and then move on. She doesn't really settle anywhere. And then she is obsessed with this romance author and loves everything that she's ever written. And one day she just makes a throwaway wish to be the next romance hero, the next romance female character. I don't know why I'm struggling over what to call it, in her favourite romance author's next book. But turns out her favourite author is now writing a thriller, so she ends up being the female lead in a thriller novel. So she is aware that she's in this novel, she is like, what's going on, but no one else in the story is aware they're there. So it's her normal life, but it's just suddenly as if she's in this really crazy action thriller thing where everyone's trying to kill her and she doesn't know what's going on, and she's meeting this wonderful cast of characters, and it was very funny. It had the humour there. I enjoyed the idea of it, like that premise was good, like it had more of an in-depth mystery to it then, which was enjoyable, and I liked that because I do like a good mystery every so often. But after a while the humour got very like one note, and they were just making the same joke quite a lot, and I was a bit like, oh, I could do with a bit more now, a few more things, which are just to make it a bit more interesting. It was also like, how many pages was it? Almost 400 pages, and that's a lot for something that's in essence a romance. I know it had extra plot to it because it had the mystery, and they were like uncovering who was trying to kill her and why and things like that, and like the bigger wider mystery that was going on, but it wasn't enough to fill that amount of pages. I did like the ending, and they kind of left it a bit open for they could do more, and there was a little bit of like a plot twist at the end, which I did like, but overall it was just a bit long for what it was. And I ended up rating that one, again, this is awful, 3.25. I did a lot of 0.25s and 2.75s in this, month. I never usually do that. I'm either a 4-star or a half-star person. But this month apparently I was just very mid about my rating, so that they needed the extras. Next up then, I actually pulled a prompt from my TBR jar, which I don't often do, and that was If Not For My Baby by Kate Golden. I bought this not long after it came out last year. Was it last year? Maybe even the year before. I think it was last year, 2025, yeah. So I bought this last year, and then it kind of just sat on my shelf, and it's not really one I would have prioritised, unfortunately. I love the cover. It's very pretty, but it just kind of screamed romance, like it's just standard romance to me, and I just hadn't been prioritising it, so I was happy that it came up in my prompt jar. So in this one we follow Clementine. She's from a small American town where she doesn't really see a way out. She works in a diner, she cares for her mum who has a chronic illness, and she's just quite, I wouldn't say content with that, but she's made peace with the fact that she probably will never do anything else with her life. And then her best friend ends up going on tour with the famous Halloran. She's a backup singer, but she then gets another opportunity to work with her favourite artist while she's on this tour, so decides to enlist Clementine's help. Clementine will then go on tour with Halloran, and the best friend will end up going on tour with the artist she truly wants to be on tour with. And then Clem is suddenly thrown for a loop because she's on this big summer-long world, across American tour of countries that she never thought she'd get to visit. She never thought she'd leave home. She's suddenly then being paid for all this, so she's like financially stable enough to help her mum and put her on a clinical trial. And while she's there, she like kind of discovers the joy of singing, and she ends up falling in love with Halloran himself. And it kind of just follows them and their romance. I really enjoyed it actually. I really liked Kate Golden's writing style. So this is an example of, the book is actually like 420 pages, but it didn't feel that long because it was interesting. Like it had enough plot to keep going, it had enough diversity in there, it wasn't all one note. She writes like a romance in a really lovely way, just like the tone of things. I just really enjoyed it. And Halloran, I think, is very much based on your typical like folk singer. He's Irish, which great, Irish accent, amazing. And he kind of felt a bit like Noah Khan, Hosier, that type of mashup of a person. But I really enjoyed it. And it kind of gave me a little bit of like Daisy Jones and the Six vibes, where they work together but there's the romance and obviously the singing and things, like it kind of that vibe too. I wouldn't quite go as far as to say forbidden, because they're both adults, they're allowed to be together, but they shouldn't because they work together and he's the lead singer and no one thinks it's going to work out, kind of thing. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Pleased I picked it up, because it would have just sat on my shelf for who knows how long if I hadn't have picked it up this month. And then I did rate it I rated it 4.25. I did a really weird month this month. 4.25 stars for this one. Next up then, I picked up another library book, and that was Yes Dear by Caro Claire Burke. I'll put a picture here because again it was a library book, so it's gone back now. And this one I was just really intrigued by because I'd seen a lot of buzz about it online, but I didn't really know anything about it going into it. So we follow a woman called Natalie, and the beginning of the story is kind of like an extended prologue because it's about like 40 pages. We see Natalie's like perfect life. She's a trad wife, like a traditional wife. So they have like 5 kids. She's pregnant with her 6th, I think, or they have 4 and she's pregnant with her 5th. They have quite a few, I can't remember how many. She does all the cooking herself, cleaning. She has this perfect life where they grow all their own vegetables, they live on a farm, they have animals. Her husband's like a typical cowboy. Her children are perfect, her life's perfect, and she is also an influencer, so she has that Instagram portrayal of people being able to see her perfect life. And something in their personal life kind of rocks the family, and then one day Natalie wakes up and she's suddenly back in the 1800s in like a proper traditional lifestyle. Like the house she's in is her house but just slightly different. The children are hers because they look like her but they're not her children. Her husband is her husband but he's not, he's just, something's wrong with him. So then we follow Natalie as she's trying to come to grips with this new life she's in and why she's there, but we also follow the past, well, the past of that initial 40 pages of how we led up to that point and how everything went wrong, and what's going on there. So it was really intriguing, and I didn't know how they were going to solve this plot point. Like, I didn't know if they were going to go down the route of she's suddenly in this like alternative reality, or there's something mentally wrong that's happened and now she suddenly thinks everything's wrong. I don't know. I didn't know how they were going to solve it. So I was impressed by the ending. I'm obviously not going to spoil it for you in case you want to read it, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and it wasn't anything that I'd imagined could have happened. So I was impressed by that point. I wouldn't really say, I don't know whether it would be like a kind of like a thriller. Did I write down, or literary fiction is what I've got it down as in my journal. It's definitely not something I've read before. I think it's being actioned for like TV or a movie, and I feel like that it would translate well into a movie. And I think Anne Hathaway's involved. I don't know if she's like producing it or starring in it, and I think that will work well too. But yeah, it was just a really intriguing story that I never would have picked up unless the hype had happened and I was just too intrigued. But for that one I rated it a 3.75. Again with the 0.75s. Next up then, I read another one which was a little bit different for me. I read My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney, and again, I'll put a picture here because I don't have a copy of my own. This one I read for work, and this is a thriller mystery. It was my first Alice Feeney. I don't tend to read a lot of mystery thrillers. I went through like a James Patterson stage. I think everyone who delves into mystery does that back in the day, but I just don't really pick it up because I read them quite quickly. I don't buy them because it feels like not a waste, because obviously I'll enjoy it, but I just read them really quickly. So I'd get them from the library or charity or shops or something like that. But anyway, so this one we follow Eden, and she goes for a run one morning, doesn't take anything with her, never brings her phone, takes her wedding rings off, just takes her house key, goes for a run around this new town that she's moved into with her husband, and when she gets back to her house she tries to put the key in the lock and it doesn't open. So she's like, oh, this is weird, definitely my house. And someone hears from the inside, someone trying to get in, comes to the door, and it's a woman that looks a little bit like her, wearing her clothes, and she's like, who are you? This is my house, what's going on? And then her husband comes to the door and he doesn't recognise her, and he thinks this woman in the house is his wife. So then Eden's like, what on earth is happening? And the thing is, they've just moved to this town and no one's actually seen Eden yet because she's been quite reclusive in getting the house sorted. She's an artist and she's having a big showing in the town that night, but no one's met her. They've all met this other Eden, who was in the house with her husband. They've all met her, they think she's Eden, so this version of Eden, the one we're following, doesn't know what's happening because no one believes her. Alongside this then, we also follow another woman. I think her name's Birdie. I want to say her name's Birdie. That rings a bell now. She is actually a police officer, like a detective, working in London, and she ends up moving back to Hope Falls, I think it's called, the small town where this whole mystery is happening, to help kind of solve it. And then we're following the two women, how their paths cross, the mysteries that happen. There are a lot of plot twists. Like, this book is under 300 pages. Is it? Or is it just? This book is just 300 pages and so many plot twists happen. I read it in a day, not in one sitting, in a few sittings, but over like a 24-hour period. Maybe even like a 12-hour period, to be honest. And yeah, it was really intriguing. I wouldn't say it's the best written thing ever, but it is quite clever in the way that the plot twists are revealed to you. They are thrown at you left, right and centre. It's hard, like I wouldn't be able to tell them to you right now because they wouldn't make sense at all. I did quite enjoy it. Again, like I said, it's not something I would usually read, but it's something that I'm glad I picked up, and I think it's perfect. It's perfect, like sitting by the pool wanting to read something fast and interesting kind of book. And that one I rated a 3 stars. So 3 stars is kind of like middle of the road for me. Like, it was good. I won't reread it. I don't feel the need to own a copy, but I had a good time reading it. And then the last book I read in June is actually another proof copy, and that is Main Characters by Bobby Palmer. This one came out on the 2nd of July, I think. It doesn't tell me that. Oh yeah, it tells me on the back. 2nd of July. And this one was really unique. So this one follows 2 characters. We have, I'm useless with names. We have Clara and Seb, and we follow their love story of how they fall in love, but not from them. So each chapter is from a different character in their lives, but never Clara and Seb. So we follow like her ex-boyfriend or his best friend's girlfriend, his dad, the person sat next to them in the pub on their first date, someone who serves them coffee, like things like that. It's just very people adjacent to their life but never them too, which was a really interesting plot. So I've read something similar when I was younger. I read a teen book called A Little Something Different, I think. Sandy Hall was the author, and that was similar, how it was a romance told by everybody but the main characters. But this one, I was surprised by how much emotion I felt. Bobby Palmer has such a way of making you feel for the characters, but you never see inside their heads. Like, I think that's such a powerful writing style, to be able to truly understand these characters without seeing directly from them. It was a really, really unique way of doing it, and I had moments where I was laughing out loud, where it was really funny, where they're just like your typical like because you follow them from when they meet, when they're essentially early 20s, teenagers, late teens, early 20s, I'd say early 20s, since you follow them from when they meet like in their early 20s all the way up to, I'd say, like late 30s, early 40s, you do get a real grasp of them as people, and I really, really loved it. I did also cry, and I'm shocked that not shocked, because the bit I cried I was sad, but I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting to cry in this book. But no, it was just a really, really lovely story and a really interesting way of doing it, which I think I was just intrigued by. That drew me in straight away, and I had to find out how he does it. But no, Bobby Palmer did a really, really good job, and I definitely recommend reading this one. I also love the cover, and that one I rated a 4.5 stars. So not quite a 5, but definitely up there. So, July I read 6 books. This is my cute little journal spread, which I was really happy with. I made using all of my pop art boxes. So I'm going to refer back to this because I can't remember anything. But I've read 6 books, and I think I unhauled around just under 20, which isn't bad odds. And really helps me with my yearly challenge that I'm doing, where I gain points for the books that I read and the books that I unhaul. And then at the end of the year, once I've had a certain amount of points, I get a prize. The prize is probably going to be books. And then I'm also doing a secondary challenge, which is to get my physical TBR down to, well, my husband's challenged me to get it to below 50, which feels like a lot. Anyway, that's besides the point. The point is, in July I read 6 books. I only have 3 of them here, because the other 3 I borrowed or they were library books. First up though, I read I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. This book was actually on my TBR for the prompt of read a book you bought pre-2024. And then, so this was the Waterstone Special Edition, so I would have bought it the year it came out. And that was 2022. So it definitely filled the prompt. So Casey McQuiston writes usually LGBTQ plus romances. This one is their first and only YA romance. So in this we follow Chloe, Smith and Rory, who have each kissed Shara Wheeler, and then she disappears and they have to kind of uncover the mystery of where she's gone. She leaves them all notes and they have to work together to figure it out. They're not friends though in normal life, they're all from kind of different, I wouldn't really say different walks of life, but they're not really friends in school. So it's kind of like breaking down those barriers of friend groups and things too. It's very fun, it's very in the style of Casey McQuiston's normal stuff, just minus all of the sex, basically, and the horniness. But it took me a minute to get into. It did also feel very reminiscent of John Green, which was not a bad thing. I loved John Green back in the day. And it kind of mentions that too. It says about like, oh, paper towns, because it's kind of that similar premise. But it was just a bit of fun. I did enjoy it. I think I gave it a 4 in the end. I gave it a 4 stars. I read it in less than 24 hours, which is wild to me because I put it off for like 4 years and then I read it in a day. Yeah, it was just a fun time, perfect for this time of year because it's the end of their school year just before they graduate to go to college. So yeah, just fun time. The romance wasn't my favourite, but everything else was. So yeah, that's fine for me. Next up then, I read Selfish Girls by Abigail Bergstrom. I'll put a picture up here because I don't own this, I borrowed it from a friend. And this one is set in Wales, so it's by a Welsh author, and it follows 3 Welsh sisters as they all come back to their hometown, and they have to deal with like their childhood trauma and a lot of things that happened in their life and how that's like affected them as adults and stuff. And we also, so we see them now, and then we see them from their childhood in the late 90s, early 2000s. And yeah, it was not really what I expected. I'd seen it compared quite a bit to Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors, which I enjoyed. It kind of had a similar feel to it, but more so just like messy family, and I do love a messy family drama. But I was expecting it. There's like a major plot point in there which isn't really explained until quite towards the end, and I was expecting it to be more dramatic than it was. Like it was very explainable, but I was like, oh no, something big and dramatic happened, and it didn't. So I think because I had that in my head the whole time I was reading it, I was expecting that, and then for that not to happen I was a bit confused. But I did still enjoy it. It was still good. I gave it a 3.5, so over half. So my rating of 3.5 kind of feels like it was just very mid. Like, it was a good book. I won't reach for it again. I don't feel the need to own it, like I borrowed it. But then I have to remind myself that 2.5 is technically like halfway on the 5-star scale. So it was above a 2.5. It was good, but I just won't go back to it, and I probably won't think about it much. Next then I read the book 3 Days in June by Anne Tyler. Again, I'll put a picture here because I borrowed this from the library. I was actually recommended this by a customer she was holding up Sandwich by Catherine Newman, which has been one of my favourite books of the year. It was a really surprise book for me. It wasn't really something I thought I would enjoy that much. So I said, I love that book, and she said, that's great. Okay, if you enjoyed this, read these 2 things. And one of them was 3 Days in June, so I borrowed that from the library like straight away. And this one we follow Gail, who is in her 60s. We follow her on 3 days in June, if you can believe it, surrounding her daughter's wedding. And she just has a very mundane, normal life. She's a deputy headmistress in a school. She just leads a very normal life. But it just so happens that the 3 days we follow, things start to turn on their heads a little bit. So she's kind of preliminarily let go from her job. She's told that it would probably be a good idea for her to find something else. And then her daughter's getting married, but things are happening surrounding that. And then her ex-husband comes to stay for the wedding, and it's all just a big hoo-ha. So it's kind of like that mundane life that they lead, but you're just dipping in on those 3 exciting days of it, which I really, really enjoyed. I loved Gail. I loved how she dealt with things and how straightforward thinking she was. So these things were quite like strange for her to have to go through. It was just a really lovely story, to be fair. I did shed a little tear at the end. It was more of like a hopeful tear, because it kind of shows you that no matter what stage of life you're at, you can still not start again, but there's still hope, like in the sense of you can change your life, you can change your job completely, you can have these big things even in your 60s, let alone when you're younger than that. I gave it 4.5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. It was just a lovely story, and I like that short time period. Like Sandwich, Catherine Newman, was over a week. So I kind of like that short, you're just dipping into their life kind of vibe. I've discovered. So yeah, that is definitely one that I think I'll end up buying a copy for myself for my shelves because I enjoyed it so much. See, which is the difference between me giving a 3.5 and a 4.5 star. Then I read another book that I'd borrowed, and that was Bitter Honey by Carol Lewis. Okay. We follow Hannah. I think she's also in her like late 60s, early 70s. She lives on an orchard. She lives on an apple farm, I think it's called. Like, she farms apples. An orchard, I don't know, that type of place, with her husband, and he passes away after, I don't think they say how he passed, but he suffers with illness for a long time and then passes away, and she finds 11 letters that he's written her to kind of explain some things that he was hiding in his life, I guess. And it's how she kind of deals with that and overcomes her grief and things, and the obstacles that are thrown at her. We also then kind of track a year of the orchard and of the cycle of life there with the trees and things, and they also have honeybees, hence why it's called Bitter Honey, which kind of help with the farm. So we see that, and it's just very, I like the nature heavy feel of it. I like the metaphors through the passing of time with the farm and things. it was a lovely story. It was really well written. It's only like 240 pages, 227, I lied to you. It was only 227 pages, but she really did a lot with those pages. I was kind of left a little bit wanting with the story. I feel like I was expecting a bit more from it, or I appreciate the way she handled her grief, because that's such a touchy subject to talk about, and obviously everyone grieves differently. So it's a really lovely way that she went about it, and how the kind of nature and the trees and things helped her get through it. But I was kind of expecting a bit more resistance with certain things that came up in the story. And we also follow 3 different women, and we don't just follow Hannah, we follow 2 other women in her life too. And that kind of felt a bit much. Like, if it was 2 women, maybe that would have made a bit more sense, because obviously the book is so short. To follow 3 and kind of be jumping about with them was a bit much. But I did still really enjoy it. I again gave it a 3.5, so it was good, but I'm glad I borrowed it. I don't feel the need to own it. Beautifully written, like I said, but yeah, just not one that I probably would reach for again. Next up then, I read Lightfall Volume 1, The Girl and the Galdorian by Tim Probert. So this one, actually, I didn't know what to read, and I asked my husband just to pick me a book off my shelf when he picked this. Which was fun, because it's a graphic novel, children's graphic novel, so it's quite quick to get through. I think I read it like in an hour, but it was really fun. We follow a girl called Bea, who is the granddaughter of the pig wizard. She's adopted, as they like to mention, and one day she goes to collect some ingredients in the forest for a potion that he's making for someone. When she comes back, he's gone. She meets a Galdorian, who are this lost race of creatures who were all thought to have died, and one actually has been sleeping for hundreds of years and has awoken and needs to get back to his family. And when he ends up going back with Bea to her house, finding her granddad missing, and then they go on a quest to try and find him. He's gone to check the seal of the Restless Sleeper, but he's quite a forgetful pig wizard, so Bea has no idea what that is or where that is, or if he would have got there safely. So then her and what's his name, Cad the Galdorian, go and find him, but it's filled with other fun creatures, loads of different kind of fantastical locations. There's a great map in the front too. We meet a lovely little cast of characters in there. She also has a cat that comes with them. And I really liked the way that Bea deals with her anxiety. Like, you kind of see like a physical representation of it. Let's see if I can find. Oh, here we go. So she has a lot of anxiety here, and it kind of all sprouts out into like a physical, and then she has like these tendrils around her, and she kind of sinks into them a little bit, so all of the panels surrounding have her feeling this anxiety, and then it kind of slowly dissipates when she gets over that little bit of an anxious moment. But I just really liked the more physical representation of it, and how then that could be construed as to the mental side of things. I don't know, I thought it was really interesting, and then for it to be a kids novel, so they can see that it's okay to have anxieties and also to work your way through them. I thought it was a really lovely touch. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Super quick to get through. I gave it 4 stars, and I probably will continue on with the series. I just only own the first one right now. But I do love a graphic novel. I just think they're fun, and I just really appreciate artistic people, hence why I read. But you know, like people who can draw and things too. So Tim actually did the illustrations and the writing for this, which I find phenomenal. But yeah, I just really like it, and some of like the imagery, like from the light to dark there of that town, I just find it so pretty. But yeah, very much enjoyed that one. The last book I read then was Steelborn by Taylor J. LaRue. It was out in August this year, but I want to say the 27th or like the 18th, towards the end I think. And in this we follow, I'm crap with names, we follow Rhea, who as a young child she was orphaned, and she made her way to the big city in her world of Rotera, and kind of became this master thief known as the Crimson Dagger. She was adopted into this world of thieves as a child, and then raised to be the best thief. She owes their leader a debt, and on her last mission for him, for when she's going to be paid off her debt, she has to steal some carriages along with 2 other people, and in the one carriage that they're stealing there is a person, and she draws the line at dealing in people. She'll steal anything but not people. So she lets this person go, and they ended up being the saviour of the magical world. So magic is outlawed in their part of the world, but in other parts it isn't, and this person was prophesied to save all of magic and their world in general, and Rhea let them go. So her boss is not happy with her because he thought selling this person would get him a lot of money, selling them to the king, who hates magic, so was going to do probably awful things to this person. So her boss decides that he's going to put a 10,000 gold bounty on her head, and she has to pay it off in 60 days, otherwise he starts attacking people she loves. So then Rhea has to kind of scramble to find this money, and she meets Katelan, who is a warrior, an immortal warrior who's been cursed to die, and if she helps him find some Kraken blood, he will pay off the debt on her head, and she can go and follow her true dreams of becoming a smith. What are they called? Oh, what does she want to do? She wants to make swords and stuff. What are they called? Whatever they're called. I can't think. Yeah, she wants to go and make swords, which is what her dad used to do. And yeah, so she needs to pay off this debt. At the beginning it felt a lot like every romantasy I've read. It was very reminiscent of Throne of Glass. It had a lot of that vibe going in there. The world itself was nothing particularly special, and I did also feel like there was a lot of plot points happening. Like, there's big setup for this, so they have to travel, so they have that whole travelling montage of them getting from A to B basically, and then there's powers that they discover they have, so there's that big thing, there's fighting the Kraken. Like, there's a lot in there that I kind of feel like in some other stories probably would have been split into maybe 2 books. But when you reach the end of this, the last 100 pages, oh my, it kicks off. I suddenly realised why the author had decided to put it all into one and kind of condense it a little bit, and the payoff paid off. It was really, really enjoyable. I think I raced through the last 100 pages. I started this more towards the beginning of the month and then was reading it for quite a while, like going back to it within my other reads, because this is pretty much the only fantasy, scratch that, it's the only fantasy I read this month, besides obviously Lightfall, which is in a fancy world, but the rest I read were fiction, so I would dip in and out of this whilst going back to my fiction picks. But those last 100 pages I just sat and read in like a couple hours because I was hooked. Yeah, the story really picks up. It's a lot of setup for the next book in the series, but I can really see where it's going now, and it paid off so well. I took back everything I said about it being similar to everything I'd read, because whilst it is, and obviously with fae and with magical beings like that, there's only so much you can do. Everything feels like it's been done, so it's going to have similarities to other worlds we know and love. But I just think it was done in a really interesting way. And yeah, there's a lot of setup in this book, so you do kind of have to go through the setup knowing that it's going to pay off. But oh my, does it pay off. And now I really think I need to buy a physical copy, like a finished copy, because what if I'm not fortunate enough to get a proof of the second book? Well, then I'm going to have to buy the nice pretty sprayed edge edition to go on my shelf. What a dilemma to have. But yeah, I rated that one a 4, but it's a high 4. So those were, alongside the 3 I don't have, those are the books I read in July. I am now also in the middle of 2 more. I'm reading a romance and a non-fiction memoir, which is strange for me. I don't read a lot of non-fiction. And we have got a few days left of July as I'm filming this, but I don't think I probably will finish anything, and if I do I'll just put it into my August wrap up for you guys. But yeah, thank you for listening to me ramble about books. I hope my reviews were helpful and maybe they made you want to pick them up or steer clear because it's not your vibe. But thank you very much for watching. Feel free to give us a like and subscribe if you want to see me yap about books some more. But I'll see you in another one. Bye bye. Yeah, it was a really lovely story. I gave it a 4.5 stars. Oh, who was that? Did you just see me get attacked by Butterbear? I don't know if I'll keep that in, but Butterbear just attacked me. and fell and hit the back of my neck. And she's chunky,